Children are often seen but not heard. They serve as timeless symbols. Their perceived and portrayed vulnerability and innocence, mobilized for decades by international agencies to encourage public support, donations, and interest in a cause, a nation, region, or continent suffering. We have seen this recently with images of Ukrainian refugee children fleeing the war, but also in the past with David Seymour's 1949 Children of Europe photo series, or the numerous Save the Children and UNICEF campaigns across the years. But these images, the images of these children, have become symbols of the terrible human cost of war and displacement, and have triggered debates on migration, child protection, our humanities, and how we treat people in need of protection. However, despite this visibility, children's voices are often absent from public and academic debates. Now, in my research, I aim to identify, recover, and collect children's voices and understand their experiences. I am Dr. Beatrice Scutaru, an assistant professor in European history at Trinity College Dublin. I am historian of modern and contemporary Europe, with a focus on socialist and post-socialist periods. I am particularly interested in the movement of people, ideas, and ideologies across national borders, on how these take place and the experiences of the people involved. For example, migrants, students, academic exchanges, tourists. My most recent project explores the humanitarian aid provided to refugee children during the Cold War, with a particular focus on the Romanian case. And I aim to understand the policies adopted at the national level as well as their application locally. I am also interested in refugee children's everyday experiences in state-led institutions and society in general, as well as responses and attitudes of host communities towards these refugees. Now, more generally, this project aims to contribute to a broader analysis of national and international humanitarian efforts on behalf of refugees in Central and Eastern European states. Every year, millions of children move across borders. Actually, as we very well know, migration is not a new phenomenon, and children have always been on the move. Despite this reality, migrant children have received less attention compared to adults. But why should we look at children? What can we learn by better understanding the experiences of children and youth from the past? Now, children are an important part of societies. They are object of policies and initiatives, but also actors in their own right. And as research has also demonstrated, children experience events in ways that might be different from those of adults. So by not focusing on their experiences, by ignoring children and youth, we fail to understand the past. And I want to look at the Cold War period to better understand what I mean. One of the case studies I'm exploring at the moment is that of the Greek children who found refuge in Romania during the Greek Civil War. Now, these children started arriving in socialist Romania in 1948. Some lived in Romania all their lives, while others ended up migrating to other countries or returning to Greece. However, during their stay in Romania, all were taken care of by the state. And these children were raised to be loyal socialist citizens that would one day return to Greece and help rebuild a better socialist state. Now, in this case, one would imagine that these children's everyday lives were filled with ideologically charged activities. But when looking at the experiences of these Greek refugee children, I have realized that, yes, these children were living in an ideologically dominated context which shaped their everyday lives. But at the same time, they also led quite ordinary lives, which had no connection to ideology and official objectives. They played and they fought. They fell in love, they fell out of love, they fell sick, they made friends, and they built new connections. They also suffered the loss of families and loved ones. They rode bicycles and climbed trees. And even during ideologically driven activities, such as learning anthems or participating in official ceremonies, children found the mix of fun and boredom, of optimism and meaningless. So children navigated state expectations with mixed feelings of attachment, dullness, but also alienation. They also sometimes resisted dominant discourses and challenged adult authority with actions that ranged from open resistance to mundane and often invisible acts. And what I want to say with this is that while the context, political, ideological context is important, and in this case, we're looking at socialism, there are experiences of childhood that go beyond political systems that are common to children living across Europe and even beyond. And taking children's experiences into account helps us better understand this period I was looking at, the Cold War, and acquire a more complete, a more complex understanding of socialism and post-socialism. What can we learn from history? First of all, my research has demonstrated the importance of moving beyond binary representations in terms of resistance and conformism, or the division of Europe in East and West, socialist and capitalist. It has instead shown the richness of not only socialist and post-socialist contexts, but also the webs of interconnections that exist in Europe, but also at a larger scale. And I would argue that we can learn to look for complexity and richness, to move beyond binaries, not only when analyzing the past, but also the present. Second, and more directly connected to contemporary events, following Russia's February invasion and military occupation of Ukraine, over 60% of Ukraine's children, or almost 2 out of every 3 children, according to UNICEF estimates, have been displaced by the war. So some of them passed by and found refuge in neighboring countries such as Romania, Poland, or Moldova. And the humanitarian aid provided to these refugees, adults or children, was not state-led as during the Cold War. This aid was driven by individuals, mostly volunteers, local nonprofits, and communities. This aid has been very effective. However, as the war continues, the capacity of this localized response, constituted mainly of volunteers, has its limits. Now, the small scale of the mobilizations is indirectly proportionate to the number of people displaced, or displaced people who need help. And basically, more people need help than are available to provide support. Finally, these community initiatives might not be able to provide the necessary support on a long-term basis. Because as the war continues, refugees start to settle in their host communities and their needs change. Now, in this context, more professional support is needed, and not only from international organizations and agencies such as UNICEF or UNHCR, but also driven by states, which would have a long-term impact and commitment. And I argue that countries such as Romania, but also other countries in the region, could draw on their past experiences of providing aid to refugees to help cope with the current situation.